Have you ever heard people claiming that they met God or encountering entities after taking psychedelics? Or maybe you are one of those people. How much of those experiences are real? And what does science say about this? My name is Salman, and we are going to explore these questions. If you look up online, you can find many people sharing their stories of spiritual experiences after taking psychedelics. However, it's hard to draw any solid conclusion based on those self-describing stories, particularly because you cannot find any coherent pattern among those stories. On the other hand, you will be surprised by the low number of research on this topic. The obvious reason was that psychedelics have been illegal for many years, and even for the researchers, they had to jump over many red tapes before doing a research. Let us start with the first one, Marsh Chapel experiment in 1960s. Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert designed an experiment to find correlation between psychedelics and spirituality. They invited volunteer students, divided them into two groups. One group received psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushroom. The other group received placebo, effectively nothing. Those that received psilocybin, they went through profound religious and spiritual experiences. The finding was conclusive. There is huge causation between taking psychedelics and a spiritual experience. 25 years later, after the Marsh Chapel experiment, a follow-up study interviewed the same volunteers, and they found that for almost all of them, that experiment had significant contribution to their spiritual life. And the study concluded that spirituality caused by psychedelics is not inferior to non-drug mystical experiences, which is a bold claim. Marsh Chapel experiment was one of a kind. It triggered a lot of controversy, particularly because it was around the same time that the counterculture event was going in the United States. Not long after this study, psychedelics become illegal. Both lead researchers, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, were fired from Harvard. And believe it or not, it took almost 3 decades for the next significant study on this topic. Fast forward to 90s, Dr. Strassman from University of New Mexico performed a series of experiments over 60 volunteers. This time he used DMT. Almost all those volunteers reported significant spiritual experience and encountering with non-physical entities. And they reported that the experience was more real than everyday reality of life. Dr. Strassman collected all those findings in a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and later on a documentary was made based on that. I put the link into the description. Many years later, in an interview, he explained that before those experiments, he expected experiences for those participants something like near-death experience or Buddhist type of spiritual experience. However, his participants reported experience of talking with entities that been already waiting for them, or communicating or receiving messages, which was totally different from his expectations. You should note that in the Marsh Chapel experiment, they used the active ingredient in magic mushroom, while Dr. Strassman, he used DMT. While both are psychedelics, each one has its specific dimensions and attributes. For example, DMT is much faster, much shorter, and very, very intense compared to that of psilocybin. This leads us to the next series of studies by Dr. Griffith in Johns Hopkins University, where he covered a wider range of psychedelics. They surveyed over 4,000 people who self-reported God encounter experience, whether it was through meditation or in religious setting or after using psychedelics. And psychedelics could be psilocybin, LSD, DMT, or ayahuasca. And then they put these people into two groups, one with drug and one without drug, and compared the results. They asked all participants, whether in non-drug group or in the psychedelic group, how was the attributes of your encounter? For most of them, it was extrasensory. That means that they didn't use sensory system for that encounter. Majority claimed there was communication going on and that they received a message, task, or insight from the encounter. Most participants, particularly non-drug group, had a vivid memory of the encounter, and the majority claimed that it was more real than everyday normal reality. They asked participants, how do you describe what you encountered with? For the non-drug group, they preferred the word God, while for the psychedelic group, they preferred the word ultimate reality. However, attributes were pretty similar among these two groups. It was benevolent, intelligent, and had agency, which means it could do stuff, it could do things. And for a majority of them, they believed that what they encountered with continued to exist after the encounter. Then they asked participants, how meaningful or significant was this encounter? For majority of participants, it was among the top 5 personally meaningful and spiritually significant in their lifetime. After the encounter, they have improvement in their life satisfaction, life purpose, life meaning, and even in their social relationships. Alright, as I told you, there are not so many different studies on this topic. There are just few quality ones, but we can find shared observations and conclusions among them. The first one is that the quality and attributes of spirituality triggered by psychedelics is not very different from that of non-drug users. It's profound, it's life-changing, and people consider it very valuable to their spiritual life. Here is the second conclusion, and it's about the content of that spiritual encounter. If at very high level we could categorize spirituality and gods in 2 big groups, one that of Abrahamic religions, that of, for example, Muslims and Jews and Christians, and the other end, let's say, the Buddhist type of spirituality and God, where Buddhist doesn't have God, but for lack of a better word, it seems that the psychedelic experience triggers spirituality and encounters that inclined more toward the former one. The entities that have agency, ultimate power, ultimate knowledge, they communicate, they have, in many cases, messages for the people. It's kind of prophet-like type of experience. Now, the most interesting question. Were those entities real? None of those studies explored this question, particularly because this is in the realm of consciousness, and science so far comes with really limited tools to explore consciousness. However, I think we can explore this question in 2 ways. For a materialistic point of view, the consciousness does not exist out there. It's our brain that builds consciousness. And if that's the case, while the experience was 100% real, the entities, what they observed, did not exist outside of their brain. It was just byproduct of brain activities. The other point of view is that the consciousness is already there. Our brain is a complex tool that helps us tap into that consciousness. It's like a radio that taps into radio frequency and then translate that into sound that we can hear. If that's the case, then it becomes very interesting, because when you have those chemicals, whether that's acid or psilocybin or DMT or other ones, in your brain, it's as if your brain receives different frequency of consciousness the way that it wasn't able to do that before, and then it observed things that were so unreal, or in the words of people who experienced that, was more real than everyday reality. What do you think about this? Have you ever experienced such a thing? Please let me know in the comment. And if you watched this far and you learned something new from this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, as I will have more videos like this coming.